Amy, let me tell you about a magical place that is so exactly designed to be enclosed space, year-round fun for the whole family that I bet you already know what I'm going to say before I even say the name. Let's say it together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Great Wolf Lodge. You got it, Amy.
My kids loved Great Wolf Lodge when we went. You probably already know that it has a huge indoor water park with a wave pool, lazy river, a bunch of massive water slides. But then your pack can hit the other attractions because wait, there's more.
Great Wolf Lodge has adventure-packed attractions like Magi Quest, a live-action game kids can play throughout the lodge, plus the Northern Lights Arcade. Spent some quality time there, so your kid who loves the lazy river and your kid who loves fantasy games will both have a great time.
Great Wolf Lodge also offers great dining options and complimentary daily events like nightly dance parties, all under one roof. Unpack the car once and you're settled in to have fun. And with 22 lodges across the country, you're always a short drive away from adventure.
We've both had such great times at Great Wolf Lodge, so bring your pack together at a lodge near you. Learn more at greatwolf.com and strengthen the pack.
Hey there, just a heads up before this episode. This interview with Jessica Zucker, author of Normalize It, includes discussions of topics including miscarriage, child loss, postpartum depression, anxiety, and mood disorders, and suicide. These topics can be heavy and emotional, so please listen with care. If you or someone you know is struggling, call 1-833-TLC-MAMA. for 24/7 free and confidential support for pregnant and new moms. And if you're experiencing a mental health crisis or suicidal thoughts, call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 for free and confidential support. We will link to some other resources in the show notes. This is a terrific conversation, and we're so glad we talked about it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret.
This is Amy. Today we are talking to Jessica Zucker. She is a Los Angeles-based psychologist specializing in reproductive health, and she is the author of the award-winning book, I Had a Miscarriage, a Memoir of Movement. Jessica's writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, New York Magazine, Vogue, and Harvard Business Review, among others. And today we'll be talking about her new book, Normalize It, Upending the Silence, Stigma, and Shame that Shape Women's Lives. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
So in the preface of the book, you talk about your story of having a miscarriage and being a very informed person in this space, and yet still how that experience kind of shaped your relationship with normalizing storytelling. So talk a little bit about that experience and how it kind of led you into this book.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm a psychologist and I specialize in women's reproductive and maternal mental health and have done so for about 15 years. And so the thing is, when I was 16 weeks into my second pregnancy and had a miscarriage while I was home by myself, this sort of unearthed my life and my career trajectory, one could say, because I had been so used to the role I had been playing in people's lives. I had read all the books on the topic. I had a background in public health and had worked internationally and thought I had a handle on these issues and knew about the research.
Right. You cite all of the statistics and you get it.
I get it. But then trauma has a way of getting us into a position where no matter how much you know, you are sort of upended. Your life changes, of course. You are in fight or flight or freeze mode. And so although I knew all the things and had read the books and gone to the conferences and sat across from women and families talking about the pain and the anguish of pregnancy and infant loss and life after, I felt wholly unprepared when it happened to me.
Why is it so different? I mean, there is so much stigma and shame, and unlearning that is what this book is about. But why do you think that is that, say, if you were in a bad car accident or if you had had a cancer diagnosis,
which I did,
probably something that we'll talk about that too, but it tends to be something you could at least feel a little bit more free to share, or at least have less shame around than something like a miscarriage. And is that learned, or why does that happen to us as women?
Well, I think that's an important question. I think that the 12-week rule plays heavily into the silence, the stigma, and the shame that results. So typically, I'm sure you know what that is. So typically, in the medical community, they'll advise families to wait to share their news until they're 12 weeks and quote unquote out of the woods. A majority of miscarriages do take place within the first trimester. However, as I learned, some of them don't. And when you break down this messaging, don't share your good news in case it becomes bad news, because then if it becomes bad news, you don't have to share that. And then you get pregnant again and you can share the good news when it's time.
Right.
To me, this is incredibly concerning and problematic. It robs us of the ability to bask in the joy. And then if things take a turn for the worse, it robs us of the incredibly important support that is needed in the aftermath of these situations. And so I think that plays into it. I also unfortunately think that from girlhood onward, which Normalize gets into, we are learning to be quiet about the very important milestones in our lives. And the research is saying that women feel a sense of self-blame and shame and guilt and even body failure in the aftermath of miscarriage. Why is that? I think that comes from the beginning, that we are taught it's not even just taught, we're groomed to think that we have a hand in all of the outcomes. And in life, in many cases, we do. If we work really hard at something, we'll get that job, we'll get that book deal, we will attain that accolade. But when it comes to reproduction, that is fully out of our control.
You talk about that in the book, and I hadn't really thought about it in just this way, although I've thought about the illusion of control a lot as we talk about motherhood, but that it is kind of a circle with control on one side and shame on the other side, or the illusion of control.
Sure.
That like, if we were talking about this with kids with special needs, that it used to be, well, you're the icebox mother and that's why your child has autism. But now it's like, you can solve this by being a superhero mom warrior. It's all kind of like, stop there. This illusion of like what we can control and not control. And the illusion of control is such an important part of the shame that comes out of it, because somehow you caused that miscarriage, even though
exactly.
that is very much not what the science says.
That's right. And I mean, this is a tangent and we don't have to necessarily go down this road, but like, do men feel this way? Are men taught this? I just don't think so.
I don't know.
I've never heard a man say, I think this miscarriage was my fault. I mean, maybe they will do testing and it'll turn out that it was a sperm issue. But even then, I don't know that creates a sense of shame.
I think that's right. And so you talk about the nature of storytelling, and I'm going to read this excerpt. The work of creating more empathy and authenticity in our lives and communities begins with telling our stories, especially the hard ones. So I think people understand, and you get into the book, the history of storytelling, the kind of cultural significance of storytelling, but talk about how you started to recognize storytelling as fundamental, really, to women's health.
Well, I mean, the reason why I opened the book, I had a different preface originally, actually. And then we realized, though, that the preface needed to begin with my miscarriage story. Why? Because I used that as a way to heal. Writing became the conduit from which I was able to actually, I was going to say patch things up, but it doesn't really work like that, but like pull the pieces of my life back together or patch them up in a totally different way, because you never get back to the person that you were necessarily. Originally, the preface was actually going to be about my breast cancer diagnosis, which came 2 weeks after my first book came out. And I thought that would be an interesting sort of continuation. It would let my original readers sort of into what happened to me next. And then we rethought that, because with my miscarriage, I ended up getting on a soapbox. unbeknownst to me. Like, it wasn't planned. I wasn't like, I'm going to start this campaign and I want to be viral or anything like that. I mean, I wasn't really even a social media person at that point in time, but I felt deeply compelled. So after my loss, the platitudes I was met with lodged shame in me I did not previously even consider, consciously or not.
That's a really interesting point. Can you put a real fine point on that? Why the platitudes? How are they connected to that shame feeling?
Because saying something like, well, okay, the usual platitudes begin with the phrase at least. At least you know you can get pregnant. At least you're young. At least you have a healthy child. At least you have a thriving career. At least you were ambivalent about having a second child. That was a good one. Those. But then I think it was 2 or 3 days after my loss, I was in the parking lot at my son's preschool picking him up. And a mom from across the way said, "Oh, you look so good. You look like you weren't even pregnant." I wanted to be pregnant. It was so much obviously about her and her own body stuff, but this like really brought up body image related issues. It made me feel shame. And I was like, why do I feel shame when this is about her? And it was because it was like, maybe I shouldn't have left the house. Like maybe I shouldn't have shared my story because now I'm receiving feedback that people think are compliments when in fact they are sort of erasing my experience altogether. And so we can feel okay about what happened to us. I trusted when I had my miscarriage that something must have been wrong with the fetus. I don't know why. I think it was because I did have a healthy child already. So I didn't go to the place of like, what's wrong with my body? So I didn't feel quiet. I didn't feel stigmatized. I did not feel shame. But then these things came creeping in, and these are all in my first book. But, you know, my mother also just happened to be coming to town a couple of days later. And her comment was actually like, "Oh, wow, you still look pregnant." And again, are people trying to make you feel like crap? Absolutely not. These are well-meaning loved ones majority of the time. And the problem is we don't have a cultural framework to talk about these things. And so everyone's just batting around these platitudes or these stupid things. They just don't know what they're saying. They're just wanting to say something. They are uncomfortable. But then what they say ends up sometimes creating a sense of regret in the griever because they're like, maybe I shouldn't have told this person. Maybe I should have stayed quiet like my society tells me I should have.
We're talking to Jessica Zucker about her new book, Normalize It, and we'll be right back. Hellions, it's time for some spring cleaning, and I don't just mean the coat closets. Doing your financial spring cleaning can actually be super easy when you let Monarch do your financial spring cleaning for you. One dashboard that gets your entire financial life organized. No more clutter, no more mess, no more logins scattered everywhere, just accounts, investments, property, and more, all in one place. Get your first year of Monarch for half off, just $50 with promo code FRESH. Monarch allows you to look not only at what you've already spent, but also to plan for the future. With Monarch, you can set savings goals, plan for big purchases, and notice spending trends before they become a problem. I can generate cash flow reports that show me what we spent this quarter, this month, what we're probably going to spend next month, and feel prepared, organized, and knowing how to plan for the future. No more surprises and a lot more clarity. Try Monarch. Use code FRESH at monarch.com to get your first year half off at just $50. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code FRESH.
At DSW, we ask the important questions, like, what shoes are you going to wear? Whether you're prepping for wedding season, festival season, or just planning the ultimate vacay, the right shoes can make or break an RSVP. So own the moment. You've got big plans, and we've got just the shoes. At the perfect price, of course. Get ready to get ready with Designer Shoe Warehouse. Head to your DSW store or dsw.com today and let us surprise you.
My favorite skincare products actually feel more like self-care, like they're so nice to put on and they smell so good that I'm actually happy when I get to that part of my day. And I swear that is how I feel about Osea's anti-aging body balm.
Amy, you are usually the lotions and potions queen on this podcast, but I have to say, hard agree.
Osea's anti-aging body balm is a liquid silk body balm that combines the lasting hydration of a lotion with the firming power of a serum, leaving skin smoother and firmer.
This body balm is clinically tested and designed to deliver visible results you can see and feel.
So we've gotten to use this product for a couple of months now, and I swear I have really noticed firmer and smoother skin, like on the back of my hands. It's like getting a mini spa treatment from head to toe.
Get a spring-worthy glow with clean, clinically tested skincare from Osea. And right now, we have a special discount just for our listeners.
Get 10% off your first order site-wide with code FRESH at OseaMalibu.com.
That's 10% off your first order with code FRESH at OSEAMalibu.com. So you talk in the book about the trifecta that shapes women's lives. This is the silence, the stigma, the shame. We've talked a bit about shame already, but I want to break these down. Let's start with silence. Why that is, to you, one of the main points of this shaping, silence.
I think that we live in a society that essentially tells girls and women to be quiet. Let's stay quiet about your first period, your symptoms of menstruation, all the way through. The book takes on lots of topics that we just don't talk enough about. And why? If we talked about them, we would feel freer. So my vision is if we talked about miscarriage, like we talked about what we're having for dinner tonight, we would all be a hell of a lot more comfortable and more connected to each other as well.
I think that there's a cliche, kind of an idea that women are better at talking to each other than men, that like men don't talk about their feelings and women are talking to each other, and that there are spaces for women's conversations and spaces where those conversations shouldn't exist, meaning they should stay within women to women only conversations, I guess.
Like a red tent thing, right? That there's a time and place.
I was just thinking about the red tent, Amy. I was just thinking about that. And so when you talk about silence, where does that fit in? Who are these conversations with, or does it matter who the conversations are with? These are just the idea that everyone should be talking about this.
So my book takes place within the four walls of my fictitious office, basically. And so in my sort of ultimate vision, I mean, it's not realistic, but people would be talking about their important stories, the taboo stories within the context of therapy. Not everybody's interested in therapy. It's, of course, out of reach for some people, culturally, religiously, whatever it is. Some people are not prone to, head into the therapy office. Totally understandable. So what I'm trying to do throughout the book is help people have additional alternatives, okay? So that we don't stay silent, but we don't necessarily have to get on a soapbox with a megaphone, do a TED Talk about something that happened to us, because I don't believe that everybody needs to turn their pain into something incredibly public. What I think, though, is that we have to move it through our bodies. And so even if that's in a journal entry, and it's in a journal entry that we end up burning, that in and of itself acknowledges, that breaks the silence in my mind. So, because silence, of course, is, am I saying it out loud? But it also can be, am I saying it, period? Right? Because I think the shame bubbles, and sometimes even it's so insidious, it could eat us whole if it just remains locked inside. So the sheer act of journaling. And so, as I said before, I found my sort of health through writing on the topic. And it led me to so much community as well. And so we don't have to shout from rooftops, but we also cannot live in this cultural requirement forever. You can't.
You make the point that it's pressure on yourself to be going through this and make sure nobody knows about it, right? Make sure you're spouse or your partner doesn't see you're still upset. Make sure everybody at work knows that you're okay now, even though it was 3 days ago. Whatever it is, that's additional work that we have to do.
That's right.
To let everybody else know we're okay, even if we're not. And you can probably get stuck there, I imagine. And I guess I am okay.
That's the thing. Right. You just made me think about the patients I work with who are struggling with perinatal and postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. And that carrying of a quiet but robust feeling of, I'm not into this, or I am incredibly not myself and super uncomfortable. I do not know if I like this role. How did I get here? What is happening? Why am I having these intrusive thoughts? To have to silence something like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis, postpartum OCD, all of it is untenable. And that is why we're seeing suicide in these situations and why the numbers, I think, are so high in this country, because we are told not only should you smile through pregnancy and glow, you should also, within a couple of days, look like you were never pregnant. And motherhood should be the thing that you are most dedicated to of all the things. Forget about yourself, forget about your work, forget about your passions. The baby is the singular focus. And actually, because of what culture does, people come over to see us to meet the new baby. And it's pretty rare for someone to say, how are you doing? Everyone is cooing over the baby and, oh my goodness. And, and that's wonderful. But I do think that something is happening here. We're really missing out on checking in on the emotional temperature of the mother herself.
Just those practical moments, like I'm thinking about being home, day 2 home with my newborn, and the grandparents are around. My father-in-law is around because he wants to see the baby. And I have like cabbage leaves going. I have maxi pads going, but it's like,
yes,
we can't let anybody know that that's happening. Of course, it's all that's happening, right? My body is in active recovery, but I have to sort of hide that because we have all this company in the room. And
exactly
how I'm doing is how the baby's doing. If the baby's well, then I'm, of course, well.
That's right. And yet, emotionally, has anyone asked you how you're doing? If you had, a healthy birth, if it was a non-traumatic birth, they're not typically asking you, how's it feeling? How's this transition? It's arguably the most major sort of transition or milestone. We go from not being a mother to being a mother and raising a human in this complicated world. It would be nice if someone said, how are you doing?
And I think that wraps around the stigma element with a lot of this stuff. And the book is framed around conversations, therapeutic conversations. And I think that somewhere when you talk about stigma, which is a word we hear and use a lot, but we think of the stigma of adults' interactions or something, but the stigma around a woman who's not feeling happy and fulfilled by having just had a baby is something maybe we don't get at as much when we're thinking about stigma. Like a mother who isn't sure this was the right choice when the baby comes out, and I'm raising my hand because I did feel that way. And I felt very much like that is not to be expressed because that's what we call an inside your head only thought back in my day.
Well, so what did you do? Did you share with anybody?
Unfortunately, and I've talked about it on the podcast, I didn't probably do enough. I had postpartum anxiety, which wasn't as recognized 15 years ago. And so I was carefully screened by my pediatrician and my own doctor for postpartum depression. But they kept asking me if I felt sad or I had any instincts to harm the baby. Their questionnaire was not hitting what was going on with me.
Right.
Which is that I was very sleepless and I was having intrusive thoughts and I was extremely anxious. I think that is something that's gotten better. I did eventually see a therapist and worked on some of it. Wasn't the greatest therapy relationship, wasn't super helpful. And I do think we've talked about, I didn't realize quite how bad it was until I was looking back at it from many years later. But I do think, my mom was also a therapist and very good about not having expectations that you were going to say like, oh my gosh, this was the greatest. Thank God Jesus sent me this baby down the rainbow. Like I was definitely able to talk about it, but not as much as I probably should have, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think the should have thing is hard because like we were talking about earlier, when you're in the trauma of things, you don't have words for it.
Right.
And especially if people aren't communing around you and realizing that your energy seems different or that you do seem, more anxious than usual. It's hard for us to recognize it in ourselves. And I do think because culture doesn't talk about these things openly, we just grit our teeth and hope for the best. We hope that time will take it away. And it often doesn't.
It kind of did in my case, but it could have been an easier path for sure, because I think also you're right that the expectation is to be fine. And so that I'm a person who prides myself on, being fine. And that if the expectation was a little bit more, this is going to be really, really hard and probably pretty unpleasant for the first 6 months, I might have had a better relationship to the whole experience. I was 37. I was mature. I was well established. And I just had a feeling of like, well, I'm not one to fall apart about these kind of things, so I'll just keep going, and I think that some of that is that expectation that, well, you're kind of supposed to be fine and keep going. So I did.
Right. Yeah. So what do you think would have happened if you would have said it out loud or like blasted it to the world, not on, social media, but just in your friendship circle or among people that you knew?
I mean, I definitely talked to my spouse and family about it. I wasn't really hiding it as much, but I think that at the time, I probably needed a medical professional to be like, this is grounded in something bigger than you. This is not just like, because people say like new moms feel anxious. And I was like, oh, that's how I feel. I feel new mom anxious. And I think maybe if there was a greater conversation about it, because people were very sympathetic and helpful. My spouse went out of his way to try to find solutions and help me sleep and lots of great things. But I think the overall water felt like, oh, I'm in about the right temperature. And if I had known that I was actually really not, that would have probably been helpful to me. And all the people around me who were like, oh, yeah, this seems like it's hard, but that's right. It's usually kind of hard.
That's what I'm thinking. Like the difference would have been if you heard somebody else telling their story at that point in your life, you would have said, oh, that's me. Then
I had that
that's
too.
Me, actually, right?
That
would have changed that moment for you.
Right.
That's
so
right.
If it was freer, if we heard this more often, and if we were educated about the differences between this is what's quote unquote normal and this is what's outside of normal when we need more help, we would be able to get it and we wouldn't have to suffer the way that we often do.
We should talk about the shame too. The actual, like I'm thinking again about being in this position myself postpartum and healthy birth, but recovery from a healthy birth is still a serious recovery. And the idea that you have to keep the evidence of that hidden from everybody because your body is shameful. Then does that mean all these topics are also shameful because they're in the end tied back to women's dirty bodies?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's perfectly put. Yes. And I think that the shame creeps in when we think that we're alone. I think that shame at the baseline is, am I bad? Or not even am I am bad. Or something is wrong with me. I'm not a good person. Or my body is X, Y, or Z. I mean, that's my biggest worry as a psychologist is the shame piece, because people then retreat with all of these feelings and thoughts. And it can lead to intense depression, anxiety, addictions, disorders, if people don't feel they can say it out loud. And so, I think women's bodies are seen as something to hide or something, when it comes to menstruation, don't talk about it. That's dirty. But yet we're all expected to have babies, and sort of the only way to have them is through having to bleed or, at least in some cases, and then be beautiful while you're pregnant, look like you weren't pregnant, don't complain, and then love motherhood more than anything in the world.
Right. On day one, please.
Yeah, exactly. And just snap back to it and then be sexy again for a while. And then, well, if you live here in LA, then once you reach about 40,
get on the barge with the other crones.
Exactly.
Get out to sea.
You're done. You're a goner.
It's all over, baby. We're going to take a break. And after that, I want to talk through some of the milestones that you talk about in the book. Amy, when I'm having a good hair day, it usually makes my whole day better. And that's why on every day, I'm taking Nutrafol.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, and it's the #1 hair growth supplement brand personally used by dermatologists. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements are peer-reviewed, NSF certified for sport, and clinically tested.
Nutrafol offers multiple formulas for men and women, tailored to different life stages and lifestyle factors, so you get support that's actually right for you. Adding Nutrafol to your daily routine is easy. Order online, no prescription needed, with automated deliveries and free shipping to keep you on track.
Let your hair be one less thing to worry about. See visibly thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair in 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you visit Nutrafol.com and enter promo code LAUGHING.
That's Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code LAUGHING. All my kids learned to swim when they were little. It was super important to me that they be confident and safe in the water. There was only one problem with that: taking them to swim lessons. I mean, the pools were freezing. There were always cranky adults doing laps right there. And it was definitely not, for any of us, what you would call fun.
Amy, heard. But now there's Goldfish Swim School. Goldfish takes a really thoughtful approach to swim lessons, combining research-based teaching with a warm, kid-friendly environment that actually helps kids thrive in the water.
Every detail at Goldfish is thoughtfully designed to create a golden experience, from shiver-free, warm indoor pools to comfy waiting areas for parents to professionally trained lifeguards on deck.
Goldfish uses an approach called the science of swim play, which combines guided play with proven teaching techniques to help kids learn to swim, build water safety skills, and gain confidence, all at their own pace. Lessons are designed to meet kids exactly where they're at.
If you've been thinking about swim lessons or just wondering where to start, this is a great opportunity. Right now, Goldfish Swim School is offering a waived membership plus your child's first lesson free at participating locations.
Just visit goldfishswimschool.com/free to find a location near you and enroll using promo code FREE.
That's goldfishswimschool.com/free, promo code FREE.
So I'm going to start with a quote, and I will say Amy and I saw each other last night after having read the book, and she immediately quoted this to me. And I was like, yes, I knew that would ring for you because it rang for me as well. So I'm going to read this quote. Every time we dare to talk about the hard things, we create ripple effects that ultimately help shape and shift the master narrative, the stigmas, the should. In the face of this revolutionary zeitgeist shift, we have the chance to exist in the mess without feeling like we are the mess.
Yep. Circle that. Highlight that.
Who wrote that? I love it. No.
It's really good. It was huge. I mean, that's the good news. And I mean, we often talk, Amy, how do you say it about like, you're having a hard time. It's as hard as you think it is. And these kind of stories. And I feel like that's a lot of what we try to do on the podcast is, listen, this is a space to talk about how hard these things are. And so you talk about a series of milestones in the book and the kind of stories that we want to try to shape around these milestones, starting with girlhood. And talk a little bit about how you see girls being shaped in childhood and changes to that zeitgeist that we should be making.
I know. It's like, maybe I'm naive, but my vision is like, if we spoke, let's say in sex ed, if that exists, I think it does. But well, what's interesting is my daughter is graduating from 5th grade in less than 2 weeks. And the school just sent out a puberty video that they're showing the kids on the last day of school.
No questions, please.
Exactly.
And right to the exits.
It's like that press conference where you just run right off.
Is that fascinating? I was like, wait, they really don't want to deal with this. So I guess, in an ideal world, we would talk about these things as normative, right? And so they would be integrated into everyday life. meaning why can't we talk about fertility in sex ed? So sex education, or at least when I was growing up, what I remember from like the one day they talked about it was use condoms, use birth control, do not get pregnant. You know, it was fear-based, and don't get an STD. That's all they really talked about. But what if they sprinkled in fertility stuff? You know, 1 in 8 couples, 1 in 7 couples struggle with fertility. Maybe you don't even have to say more, but that way a woman in her 30s isn't bowled over when she finds out that she has a diagnosis of, let's say, secondary infertility, because she would at least be like, oh, I remember when I was 10, they mentioned it in class. I mean, that wouldn't really do enough, but I'm just saying, if we were to acknowledge that not every pregnancy leads to a healthy
child. Whole idea that like pregnancy is as easy as falling off a log, right? Like getting breathed on by the wrong person. Watch out.
Well, back in our day, if you made out in bathing suits, you were in high risk of, that was the Catholic school education that I got.
That's right. I mean, it's fascinating, and it's troubling because, you know, kids we all need to know things, right? So later in the book, I get into menopause, the psychological elements of menopause and perimenopause. If we were talked to about menopause in our 20s, 30s, we wouldn't be surprised. We wouldn't be freaking out thinking we had dementia because of brain fog. Well, we still might, but at least we would know that this is a thing. And yes, there are new books coming out about menopause right now, and it's wonderful that menopause is having a moment, but it's like we needed it 20 years ago, or I needed the information earlier. And so I think that's what I'm trying to say through the whole book. The milestones are made harder by a lack of information and by a lack of public discourse.
And it reminds me of we had Ibram Kendi on the podcast talking about racism, and that he was making the point that, like, when you don't address things, it teaches children that there's something shameful about it. And that is very true too about women's bodies. I'm just like making that connection as we're having the conversation. That,
exactly.
Like, if you will not talk about menstruation in front of your boys, you are saying to them, this is too shameful a topic for us to discuss.
Right.
Now, there's another side to it, which was, I don't know if it's normalization. I don't know if it's where we are in the cycle. My boys do not want to talk to me about menstruation. You know, that's not something they're sitting down to be like, can't wait to jaw about this with you, Mom. But
right. Just like my son doesn't want me to talk about female sexual pleasure. But yeah, he's 16 years old.
Yes.
So I'm trying to introduce the concept. But yeah, they don't want to hear about it from us. But
just walking past the kitchen, you know what I mean? Just getting it. I do see in my sons an ability to have it brought up in front of them, right? That the sight of a tampon isn't something that I remember being told when I was young, that I should have the tampons like at the bottom of the grocery bag, right? Lest somebody see that I was carrying them and put 2 and 2 together. And half of my teenage brain was like, come on, that's dumb. And then half of me was like, okay, I'll remember that for next time.
Exactly.
So I think we're better than that now with boys, but there's a long way to go.
I think so too.
I think it's a room where you can have a lot of small revolutions, like saying to my teenage boy, like, add tampons to the shopping list that hangs in the kitchen, and like, he'll walk over and write tampons on the shopping list. That is something that would never have happened in my house growing up. And even just like I remember when we were first together being like, my husband was going to the store and I'm like, I wonder if it's okay to ask him to get tampons for me. Like, guess what? It is, you know?
And yes, it is.
I think there's a lot of room. And I will say, having a teenage girl, I do see a difference from when I was a teenager already.
Okay.
But I think there's room for it to keep moving forward, just in terms of, you know, getting a period and the girls all being like excited and here's what you need. And I have this and then, you know, and it may be partly related to where I live, but it did not seem like, tell no one this has happened to you.
Where do you live? Are you in Northern California?
In the Northeast. Oh. No, I'm in the Northeast.
Yeah. You know, I'm sort of waiting for my daughter to get her period, and I am having anxiety about it.
Yeah, it is. It's weird that it's so hard to talk about. And I remember my mom kind of trying to be very open about it, and that wigged me out. Like, I hated that too. So
that's the thing.
It's hard. It's a hard needle to thread.
Right. That's the thing. It's like, we can't totally, there's not one way. I look at my daughter and she's a lot more self-conscious than I remember being. And so I'm sort of struggling with that and trying to navigate it. And I don't know. I want to, people are talking about period parties and I'm like, well, that is going to make her hate me.
Yeah. A cake?
Yeah.
No.
That's that overcorrection space. And also, this is where you would say, like, you have to parent the kid you have. Like, there might be a girl out there who's like, I got my period, hire the marching band, we're going to town to shout it out. But there's also a lot of girls who are like, everything about me feels uncomfortable right now. And I don't want this shouted and celebrated. Like, I think we need to normalize
letting
female experiences be on a spectrum as well.
Totally.
That like you may feel super comfortable in your body at certain times and very uncomfortable. And if I want to wear a string bikini to the pool in my postpartum 50-year-old body, like that's fine. But also some other people may be like, I'm not comfortable showing off my body. Like, it has to be okay to be all women. It can't just be okay to be the new, like, flag waving period party person too.
Right. But it's like, if we're talking about how do we model for our kids the way to normalize, then it's sort of, it does put the onus on us as mothers. And so I want to make her comfortable, but you're right. I want to meet her where she's at. Like, I don't think a party would be appropriate. And I don't think a talk about, like, now you're a woman is the way to go with her either, because she's 11. Anyway, I think it's just interesting. I think as long as we are doing our best and we are not repeating patterns from the past that lodge additional shame into our children, then we're making strides in the right direction.
And I think there's a million steps before the marching band parade that really are just about, like, hey, have you gotten your period yet? Have your friends gotten their period? Oh, your friend got her period. How's she feeling? Like, is it, it can be a lot of different things. It can be kind of a nothing, or it can be really uncomfortable. And I think the normalization just happens at 1,000. We say this all the time on the podcast. It's 1,000 conversations as opposed to that one conversation you have to get right or wrong.
Amen.
And like, oh, I'm on my period, I better pack tampons. Like, normalizing it every day with all of these moments, because I think we put way too much pressure on, like, the day the announcement
sit
comes,
on the edge of the bed
to say the right thing, or I'm going to do the wrong thing. But I think it's more about the million moments where you're like, hey, throw tampons on the shopping list, 16-year-old boy.
Yes, I love that.
This is, you say in the book, I hadn't heard this term before, neural coupling. And it seems to me like this is the answer. You say, when we see or hear a story, our brain activity begins to mirror that of the storyteller. And it's a process called neural coupling. And it's why we need to storytell, because it builds understanding and empathy in community. So it seems to me like every time each of these little 1,000 conversations, as we're saying, it's building neural coupling. It's not getting it 100% right. It's just mentioning it at all is a little bit of neural coupling.
Exactly. Yes, I love that. And it takes the pressure off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Because it's not about making your 16-year-old necessarily sit down and have a conversation right now about the menstrual cycle, it's just letting it be in the water of what we're all talking about all the time that I think is really beneficial.
Yes, and I think that will ultimately change the zeitgeist if we're having a million little discussions and normalizing things along the way.
This was a great conversation, Jessica. Tell us where people can, the book is out now. Tell us where people can find it. We will link to it on our bookshop so you can find it there. And tell our listeners where else they can find you.
Yes. So on Instagram, I'm at I Had a Miscarriage. My website is drjessicazucker.com. And my book is available everywhere books are sold.
The book is called Normalize It, Upending the Silence, Stigma, and Shame That Shape Women's Lives. Jessica, this was great. Thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you so much for having me.